So we are live? Yeah.
We are live.
We are live. So guys, welcome everyone to this new format of UpGrad hangout session that we're doing for the first time. So we need to sort of do a great job of that.
Yep, we'll try. We'll try.
I think this was a lot of feedback that came from a lot of our sort of earlier participants that we may need to relook at the format, because otherwise it becomes sort of quite
one way.
And that way sort of it will be slightly more interactive. So the format, guys, for this particular session is the following, which is we have a certain set of questions that we received earlier, and I'll be sort of taking those questions with Ronnie, and Ronnie will be answering those questions for you guys. During the sort of discussion, I'm also getting live questions on my sort of phone as well. So keep on sending those questions on the chat box, and these questions will be fed live to me. So I'll pick and raise those questions directly with you, Ronnie.
Yeah, and you're going to answer quite a few of those questions yourself.
Yes,
too,
right? Yeah. So without any sort of further delay, we'll get started with this discussion. This discussion is largely sort of focused about your entrepreneurial journey, about the startups that each of these individuals are going through, and any specific questions coming on the way. The first question that I'm going to pick up is by Adarsh Abhinav. He's interested in understanding why did you even start with UpGrad? What was the thought process of taking up an education sector as the next sort of phase of your entrepreneurial journey? And post which sort of we move on to sort of various other segments in which students have asked questions.
Partly because I had a low education background myself, I thought I'd get into the education business. No, that's a joke. That's absolutely a joke. On a more serious note, I think personally for me, it was establishing and looking at sectors where over the next 10 years, I think there's so much of opportunity to do new things. I think in my past life, what I did in media for 20 years, I think the excitement was always about trying to be disruptive, trying to start new things, trying to push the envelope, trying to be bold on a couple of things, taking a lot, and at the end of the day, creating a business, but also contributing to creating an industry. And I can't think of, maybe outside of the health sector, or any other sector that offers those kind of absolute open challenges right now. And then I think it formulated much more in my mind when sort of Mayank and I met and when we started discussing. And I think I would say which part of education was much more something that you originated in that context, that higher education was really the place to be. And because that's such a wide place, it's such an open canvas. So to put that into context for an entrepreneur, I think as an entrepreneur thinking from both our points of view, it was really identifying such an open space and being able to do it. Criterion was, can we do something so differently in a space where a lot of conventional approach has been taken on, and therefore online in itself is something to look at. And we're very committed about the fact that it's online, because I think that's really the future for all of you all sitting out there. Time is scarce, more scarce than what it was 5 years back, definitely more scarce when I started off in my business. Therefore, your options in terms of that are much more limited. And therefore, we think that the future is online. So our job is to sell you why online is important, why UpGrad is important, and then finally, why you should continue on your entrepreneurial journey or search for entrepreneurship or clarity for entrepreneurship.
I think on that point, even when I sort of met you for the first time, because at that point in time, I was sort of also in the education space, and I looked at education for sort of a decade, at least, various sort of sectors of education across different geographies. I think one of the interesting things that also I realized while looking at those companies was everyone has tried to do something in education, and specifically in the online education space, but we have yet started scratching surface. And where India stands right now, with the kind of education requirement that we have, I think a purely brick and mortar was not the answer that we were looking at that point in time. And I think online was definitely the way to go. And even in the online space, and I think there are many of you who are watching us live, this particular hangout, a lot of this was not possible a couple of years, 3 years, 4 years back. And I think technology has taken off in a way in which a lot of these interactions which we never felt would happen online are sort of moving online in that context.
Yeah, and I think we're trying to create as much of what you think is an offline experience online. Okay, the two of us are having a virtual chat with all of you all. There are, from what I can see, close to about 70, 80 people already logged on, and more will join in. Last week we did one, and there were 110 people on the whole thing. And it's a virtual classroom in many aspects. So I think that's great.
Yeah. Now, so slightly controversial question. I think you have been an entrepreneur, build successful businesses, scale them up. But we all decided to start off with a program on entrepreneurship. And I think this is quite counterintuitive. And many of you guys who are out there, we are talking about a program on entrepreneurship. And one of the questions that always comes up, and many of them have raised this question, can entrepreneurship be taught? What's your answer to that?
Well, the answer is a yes, because there are certain aspects. To become an entrepreneur, you need a different DNA, and you need your own risk-taking ability. You need to be able to figure out, are you the problem solver? But then there's an element of learning lessons, okay? And I think like in leadership, like in management, like when you're taking a job on, why do you go for a 1-month training or a 1-week training, even in your job? Why do CEOs take 4 weeks off and go for that? It is more to sort of create an ecosystem and learn from other people, learn from an environment. Today's environment is we've got to constantly be learning. There's no full stop on, okay, I know everything I need to know, now I can go out and start building a business. And I think therefore it has to be taught, because what we aim to do here in the 15 weeks, etc., that the course will go through, or 12 to 15 weeks, is really to try and see whether we can identify areas for you where you'll make less mistakes as you go forward. And to me, that's what needs to be taught. That's a learning experience in itself.
Yeah, I think for me, I think on the other hand, what I was mostly interested in sort of driving through this, because as an investor, sort of seeing some companies and investing in some of them, was at the early stage, it's a lot about clarity and not just getting answers to your question, but getting more questions that you need to be sort of clearer about. And when we were designing the program, for a lot of you out there, the entire focus was to provide clarity of thought and a structured way of thinking when you go about your entrepreneurial journey. I think the answers to each of these questions are fundamentally different for each one of us. I mean, how do I get my first 100 customers? How do you get your first 100 customers? Are going to be very different. But knowing those questions that you need to be aware of as you go about entrepreneurial journey is what at least we intend to achieve with the startup with UpGrad.
Yeah, and I think everyone thinks of entrepreneurship as this one non-teachable item. But I'm saying today, the category of courses that you're seeing here today, there were, a course on data management, product management, digital marketing. These are not courses that were existing 5 years, 7 years back,
absolutely,
right? So they've all been created. Now, you can 5 years back could have asked the question, can data analytics be taught? And most conventional institutions would have said, no, you first do an MBA. In the MBA, there's a compartment that we will do that.
Yeah.
So that's how the world is evolving, I think.
So guys, what I'm going to do, the floor for questions coming directly live to us. There are certain set of questions that I'll pick up. We are going to divide the session from here on for another 50 minutes into 3 broad categories, which is the way the program is designed for us. One is going to be, the first category is going to be on idea validation, starting up. The second category is focusing on scaling up and growing a business. And the third category will be around funding and legal. Yeah. And we'll just sort of take on questions. For the first 15 minutes or 20 minutes so, we'll be taking questions on starting up. So keep sending across your questions onto our chat platform, and I'll get access to those questions and I'll provide answers to those as soon as they come.
Yeah, just not to second guess, Mayank, I think what he's actually described for you is 3 different chapters, because in our 3-month course, we've broken it up month on month against these 3 broad verticals in any case. So that's kind of almost giving you that sense that that's what we focus on as we go forward, for you to come on board.
Yep. So the first section which is starting up and idea validation. It's a simple question: why do businesses fail? And we're seeing a lot of businesses coming up and mushrooming, and sort of many startups coming up. And there's the Startup India initiative.
I think the question is how you define failure, right? So if you define failure as the first time you had a setback and the second time you have a setback and you give up, and that's what you define as a failure, then your question is got answered right there as to why do businesses fail. Because obviously you are going to have setbacks. You are not going to be able to go with every single thing that you planned in your plan. So businesses take time. And if you don't have that context of time, and if you don't have the context of what is your time to make a success of it, because as they would say finally, eventually you will be successful. It's a question of timing. So I think the question is, why do businesses fail? Because I would say 99 out of the 100 times, more or less, it would be people are giving up. Sometimes out of compulsion, sometimes because they really went broke, sometimes they made a really big mistake. But at the end of the day, I think if you have this concept that I don't have a choice and I'm going to be an entrepreneur for the rest of my life, you'll be surprised at what may happen. So I think in a simple answer, it would be timing and not being able to just stay the course and say, just to be clear about that thought process, you may need to pivot your business 5 times. So let's not mix up between just staying maniacally on one idea. You may need to pivot the business, you may need to pivot an idea, you may need to pivot the execution. But if you give up on what you started off to do, then you've accepted failure. And I think that's really the timing part is for most businesses.
I think that's what Madhusudan Khandal and Sanjay Banerjee were sort of referring to. I mean, I think one point that they wanted your opinion on is this, I mean, you have seen it both from being an entrepreneur, but also from an investor's perspective. Is it that the entrepreneurs lose the passion as they go about doing this? Or is it just that they realize that, look, they lack guidance or mentorship?
I think broadly, I would say from whatever I've noticed is it requires maturity. And as an entrepreneur, whether you like it or not, you need to mature faster than most people, you know. And if you started a maturity, and I don't mean maturity, I think maturity is just understanding the entire approach of everything else, growing up, being able to withstand shocks, being able to take on the burden, being able to be the solution guy, the leader, everything else. And I don't think I've ever seen people losing steam as much as I think it's much more, when you go up in confidence and you come down in confidence, unless you have a reservoir of your own conviction and your confidence in yourself, the chances are then when the going gets good, you got to dip into your confidence reservoir, you got to dip into your own conviction reservoir that says, I'm going to be able to do that. Those weak moments can leave out and get to another level, I think.
Yeah. No, I think just one interesting point that came up, because this is a theme that we are seeing a lot for this particular batch of students coming in, is that we hear a lot about online businesses, e-commerce, food tech, logistics, last mile delivery, etc. And there's a question from Christina Michael, who's thinking of doing something in waste management, energy conservation. And according to what we hear in the media, that's not a sexy field to be in.
I can tell you right now, all those sexy businesses are not getting funded. And it's only the health, education, waste management, all those businesses that are getting funded. You won't hear about them in the newspaper, but people are looking for those kind of businesses.
But yeah, on the waste management side, is this, like, do you see this as an opportunity from at least from an outsider perspective, as you look at what's going around here in the city, in the urban development, with those smart cities that are coming up?
I mean, I think as a simple answer, yes, because let's put it, most of our urban cities are challenged with this as a resource of firstly about of doing this in a structured and organized way. And second, the entire concept of what you can do with all of that and the whole biofuels and the whole energy sector that can actually come out from that. So one is just aggregating this, and the second one is what you can bring out as products and actually make it self-sufficient. So it's a very, very, very enlargeable business. I think it's the need of the hour from that point of view. So I see that as all positives in terms of opportunity. I think the question here is much more about applying technology and being able to be smart about that business model. Most people look at this as, I'll be an aggregator, and a lot of them feel that it's about actually getting things into place and then seeing how you can recycle them in a certain particular manner. And then it becomes an aggregator business. I think we need to go past an aggregation model in waste management and see how technology and how you're going to go into the other cycle of how you're going to take waste management, because the real value is going to get created, not in collection, but in actually reutilization of the whole process.
So on that, just sort of pushing you a bit on that question, which is waste management, energy conservation are huge areas. I mean, there's a lot more that can happen. And I think when Uber started, they did not think that they will be in the transportation business. They felt that, look, I just need to solve how do I hail a cab easily. For someone who's starting up, and Christina had this question earlier, for someone who's starting up very early on, is it a macro picture they should come with, or should they start with a very small pain point and then go back and see how the business is evolving? He may start with something very small.
My only thing, and that's the same in education, and it's the same in health, and it's the same in waste management. You can start at whatever level you want, but I think you need to ask the why and answer the why of this business before you get into the how and the what. This is quite important in some of these businesses. And I think it goes back to our first question when you asked me, and we both asked ourselves actually on that thought process. I think we got the why very clearly right in the beginning. And you rightly, whoever asked the question said, why are we in education?
Yeah.
And I think these are sectors where the whys are very important. So, and the reason I'm saying that is because you need to understand you're in this business. At the end of the day, you might do this after 3 years or 4 years or 5 years. What's the actual model? Are you growing to that so that you're going to make energy, make biofuels, make manure, make X, Y, Z, or are you solving, a waste problem, or are you solving a product? Are you going to take that as a value chain towards that? You may not start with that. You may still start at this level. That's what I would advise you to do. That just get a little bit more clarity on that thought process. It may sound, too ambitious for you, or like I'm thinking 5 steps ahead. First, I have to figure out this model, but no, I think you're not. In these kind of segments, if you know where you want to go from A point to B, even if it's 3 years or 4 years, I think it'll stand you in incredibly good stead, because a lot of other people are looking at waste management, but I think are looking at it very tactically.
Got it. Yeah. So there's a question from Sharat about the future of educational startup. I think to some extent we have covered that. So Sharat, we'll sort of probably, you can replay the sort of video and you will get answer to those questions. There's also in the early stage this concept of 1 million likes versus 1,000 love. And there are 2 different school of thoughts that, look, I need to get 1 million likes versus I need to get 1,000 love. 1,000 people to sort of love what I'm doing right now. Any thoughts on how should an early stage person think about when they're starting up, that should they go about expanding to sort of millions of people? And
so I'm not second guessing the like and the love, but let me clarify at least from where I see. There are 2 aspects to that. One is obviously to get a strong customer, a customer that is more hooked onto you, a customer that is much more a repeat customer, a customer that is more profitable. If that's the definition of love, I think that's definitely more valuable. On the flip side, I do want to say that the Indian market is much more about scale and much more about, because of the nature of the number of people that we are. If you're looking at a business, we need to look at it in scale. And it's always going to be price sensitive. Whatever we do in whatever form, we're always going to be challenged and price sensitive. The best multinationals, whatever they're doing, you'll find that they're cost products, whether it's a McDonald's or whether it's a Lever's who's been here for 100 years. They know that what products they sell anywhere else in the world, they'll be able to sell 10x of them, but they will not be able to sell at the same price they sell it, even in some of the other emerging markets. So that's the balance, I think, that goes there. That I think the love part is important, but the like part, and I don't mean that frivolously, because if you get into, I don't want anyone to misunderstand this as, oh, but then I get my 20 million views and 70 million these things, and that's what everyone's looking for. No, I think the depth of customers is very important, but India is a volume business that will constantly and almost permanently remain very price sensitive as compared to most of the other markets. And as much as we all keep saying the word brand, people are not that ready to pay premiums for brands. So watch out for that philosophy also in this love and like context.
So there's an interesting question that came up, which I can relate to from Nami Nathan. I think the question was around what is a good time to. A lot of folks are actually working. When should they switch, move out of their job, and get it towards the entrepreneurial ecosystem? And I remember talking before I took the plunge. I had my baby 2 months back. So someone asked me when is the right time. The answer to that is, look, there's no right time. Every time is the right time. How should a working professional think about quitting and moving on and taking up an entrepreneurial sort of journey for themselves?
Yeah, so I'll answer this question in 2 manners. Firstly, I think if you're asking me personally, I strongly recommend that if you can't get on with taking the risk of moving out and giving it your everything, chances are you're not going to be able to cross that bridge that often. So my personal belief and my personal experience, my personal sense is, if you're really serious about it, how are you really going to be able to start a business and give it everything you've got unless you actually get on with it and give it your 100% all? And secondly, if you're not willing to take this risk, there'll be so many bigger risks that you'll have to take. So that's my belief, and that's what I'm going to stay with. I do want to also state that you will find a lot of people who actually stuck with their jobs, managed to do parallel work, hedged their bets quite a lot, and have still turned out to be extremely successful. So, and Steve Jobs, his original co-founder, stayed in his job at, I think, Hewlett Packard or wherever he was, till way after he invented the Mac, and even the product was launched and whatever else. He still didn't. He was a founder in Apple, but he hadn't left his job in one of the, I think, IBM or Hewlett Packard or whatever he was working on. There are multiple examples, not just in in the Western markets, but even here, where you'll find that people have
managed.
Yeah, and I think that DNA is a DNA of a person, because that's the time where I think what happens is that some people have that massive risk-taking ability and just want to jump and take that leap and then say, I'll figure it out. I'll figure out how to swim when I jump off the cliff. There are other people who also make very successful entrepreneurs, but take calculated risks. And then for the rest of their life, their DNA is of calculated risks. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I don't think it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So it's going to be that tight balance. But if you're doing it as a safety blanket, I think it's a big challenge. If you're doing it as, I know exactly what I'm doing, I'm on absolute stretch mode, nothing that I want to do that will stop me from getting this business going, and actually I want to finish learning something here or create a 10 lakh, 20 lakh, 30 lakh corpus, if there are good reasons, but with a specific time framework, I think I would say that a lot of people do that. So there's no to that. But I'll go back to my original theory that if you don't want to take the risk now on this, when will you take the risk?
I think I think we were debating this earlier when we were designing the program also, that this question keeps on coming back as to how do you define entrepreneurial traits. And I think as part of the program, we have kept a module that talks about different entrepreneurial traits. And I think there is no right or wrong answer to which way the entrepreneurial trait
And I think this goes back to the earlier question you asked, that can entrepreneurship be taught?
Yeah.
And if you'll see through in our 3-month program, there's subtleties in the thought process. The kind of questions and the kind of narrative that's there is to get you thinking. At the end of the 3 months, we don't think we'll have a certificate for you that says, you're ready to be an entrepreneur, and you're not ready to be an entrepreneur. It'll be something that we believe it'll accelerate your own decision-making process and your own clarity. And this is for people who are sitting on the fence. Now, I know a bulk of you are already entrepreneurs. It'll give you a different perspective on that.
Correct. Just, I'll pick up one last question on the first section of starting up an idea, need gap validation. And this question is on online business. And I think there are two schools of thought. One that says, look, online is the way to go. The other are people who are saying that, look, if I'm doing offline, I'll not get funded. And I think there's a conflict between the online and the offline world without really realizing that the sort of difference lies in leveraging technology, whether it be offline business or online business.
Yeah.
There's a question that came from Sumit Rastogi and also on our sort of live chat. A founder who's looking at an offline business says if an online competitor comes, he wins the market, he or she wins the market. Is it naivety of not leveraging technology and just calling?
Firstly, I think that premise is wrong. I think that's quite untrue.
Yeah.
Just because that online guy got funded doesn't mean he's won the battle. I mean, he might have won that skirmish. He might have won that whatever that thing. This is not one war. It's an overall long-term thought process. So I think the very premise that people feel that today the perception is online has won. The jury's out. What has won is massive amount of consumers who in India wanted touch and feel, wanted logistics and whatever else, have managed to come online. So that I think is a phenomenal start. But has online won? I don't think so. So nobody should start with the premise that if I'm an offline business, I'm toast because online will always overtake me.
I think on that, just my second perspective would be that it's not online versus offline. The way I see this is, if you have to scale up, you have to leverage technology, and leveraging technology either be in terms of distribution, reaching out to consumer. And I think that's what people perceive, that if the company is sitting on www, it becomes online. But even for Flipkart to become Flipkart, leveraging technology to improve logistics, and all those elements are what creates sustainable differentiation. Yeah,
but if the number one most valuable company in the world does also believe that they need to have that touch and feel and want to have their own retail outlets and they want to control that, you've seen that. I don't think anyone, when they got into the business, is fighting shy of saying, I therefore need to be only online and I don't want to be offline in that context. So I think in the product and commerce space, many people have done an excellent mix of the two, and that's worked. But I don't think one or the other is really the case. Now, if you look at the education space here, I think it's our challenge because if you're going to go pan-India, for example, and we want all of you all in one place into a virtual classroom, then the focus is how do we leverage technology to its absolute maximum for all of you all to feel in one place.
I'll just probably on this last question, which just came in now by Girish and Akshay. And again, the specific question whether fashion rental business or cybersecurity are the business to be in. But from an outsider perspective, what areas would you recommend individuals to sort of look at this point in time, or would you say that like the entire field is still open
in the what online space?
In the online space currently, or are there newer technologies, AI or sort
there
of?
There have to be. I think first everyone thought it was books, then it became X, then it became Y. We're just seeing what's happened over the next 3 or 4 months, 3 or 4 years. In fact, I think that home services seems to be the new one. The whole food technology part. 1 year back, 1.5 years back, if everyone thought, outside of the fact that if you had to get delivery of a thought process, you'd call that delivery of food. Because delivery of food, back-ending of food that has actually gone into reinventing what is packaged food and what is a lunch has happened because the delivery mechanism is that. So it's moved the other way around. So I think each of them have got umpteen opportunities, and there will be new sectors opening up. I think just in the last 1 year, you've seen so many new sectors that have come up. Now, I know food has been there for a period of time, but I think the food tech has come in. I think the home services segment. But I would say, things like legal, finance, just those elements, which are huge because it's not just about any business. Over a period of time, stockbroking, insurance, for example. I mean, for most of you all, you want to understand that actually one of the biggest employers in India in the offline space was insurance, because every second person was an insurance agent. That's how every housewife was an insurance agent. In America, every housewife may be an Amway personnel, but in India, everyone was an LIC agent in that context. Now that's history because nobody wants to do offline thought process on that. So there's so many of these that are coming up. And I think the whole, what I would call the pay and the wallet part is going to also open up completely new opportunities.
Absolutely. I think beyond that, I also feel that those other areas where you get the robotics or Internet of Things and stuff like that, because Siddharth had a question, because I think those are interesting areas.
I think artificial intelligence is going to be huge. At some stage, virtual reality will be big. I think India may not be able to be right at the cutting edge of that because I still think we've got some.
Unless UpGrad comes up with a VR program and offers it to individuals to scale up. Guys, so we'll be moving to the second section of our discussion, which is around scaling up. So the question that we'll be taking up is on how do you acquire first customers, how do you form a team. There's a question that we had earlier, Ronnie, from Sanjay Banerjee and Rahul Khanna. And I'm just going to tweak the question and come back with what they're looking at. Is, as an entrepreneur starting up and sort of going into the acceleration mode, when do I think that it's the right time for me to start accelerating? I mean, because as an entrepreneur, I have no clue whether with limited resources, should I go all out? Should I just focus on conserving those resources, ensure that the product gets ready?
Yeah, I think this is the mythical situation again, because most people are sort of getting a lot of peer pressure on this all out. I mean, you are the only best judge for how you're going to be able to figure out, because it's a combination of your vision and your ambition, the company's ability to be able to rise to that. What are the core competencies within the team? Have you got the right funding, the right resources, and the right team members to take it to the next level? And is your market there? And if you haven't answered those questions, you'll be just jumping up and down. You might be a dwarf trying to jump up and down, trying to go with that thought process. Now, I think there's too much pressure for a lot of people because overnight in India, I think the biggest fallacy, as you've seen, where right now the correction is happening in some of the companies, is this whole concept where everyone thought you could run pan-India businesses. Firstly, India is a complex country in the first place. Each state has its own cultural values, its own tax laws, it's so many things. Every 100 miles, the taste of the same food from a dosa to a biryani changes in India. So many factors that are intricate. Levers took 50 years maybe to build an all India business. So if we believe that go for it means let me go run an all India business, absolutely not. I think some of the people who've run a phenomenal model in one city, championed it, created such an aura of success that now he's got people clamoring from all the other cities that says, I want, how come you're not coming to a city? And then you unleash that and then go forward. So I think first you need to define, what is it that what you mean by go for it? And secondly, it has to come from you. It cannot come from your peer pressure. It cannot come from you feeling oh, but my competition is in 6 cities, so I need to be in 6 cities and therefore I need to go for it. Because you don't know whether your competition will last 6 months. And if you start copying him, then you're out of business, because he may be thinking of 5 other different things and you're following, his ass, frankly, from that point of view. And you may land up, pretty much in the same place. So I would caution anyone to look at anything else. Of course, scale is important, but first figure out your own competence, your own ambition, your ability to do that. Without team and finance, team first, finance second.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important point, because when you again going back to the program design itself as to what the implication of that was for us, we realized that identifying the critical success factors early upfront is very important. Is it about being present all over the place? Then yes, you will go across and create presence all over the place. Otherwise, you just focus on ensuring that what you have really good is really sharp. That when you go out all in the market, then you are almost there to win the market for you. So there's a question that we got from Ankit Datta on the live chat, which is how at an early stage I should think about getting my first 100 customer. Is it about digital marketing, or is it about a lot of brute force in which I should just go out in the market? As a founder, how should one think of getting the first 100?
I would think the first 100 customers, you should be able to do it even without digital marketing. In that context. And I think those will be your most well-founded customers. And the reason I say that is because it'll have a personal touch to that thought process, but it'll have so much learning lessons, because you'll have learned that customer interaction at that level in which you're setting the culture for your organization. So I'm glad you used the word the first 100 and not the first 100,000 or the first 10,000. And I think that's sometimes the right way to look at that, because if you can learn from that, that's your prototype of people that can go with the pace. I think this whole digital marketing thing is still a big myth. It's still an unsolved situation. I've interacted with a lot of multinational companies who are just feeling the pressure that says, what am I missing out on? And therefore marketing managers are sitting and scratching their head that maybe I need to spend money on digital marketing because I'm losing the race in that thought process. You've got to figure out your efficacy. Are people consuming digital content and are on the internet? Absolutely. Is that the most effective way to go forward? And are you reaching people? Yes. But I think we need to figure out the ROI on that thought process, because I would say it's right now one of the lowest in the industry. For you to be able to convert it to somebody's attention, and then somebody's curiosity, and then actually somebody coming and paying for your product, service, or whatever else. I think right now it's still at a very inefficient stage. So this whole thing that everyone has a myth that I can start a business in digital advertising is cheap is turning out to be quite the reverse.
No, correct. I think one of the ways that we look at it is with digital marketing, it has become easier for you to reach out to customers anywhere in the country, which means it has become equally easier for your competitor to reach out to any person in any part of the country. So I think you need to.
And therefore, attention span, recall, and conversion is very, very tough.
Very tough. But I think you have to own the channel, without which it becomes very, very tough. And early stage, I think I completely believe with Ronnie. I mean, even now, I call up personally to students understanding whether they should sort of join the program.
I cannot explain how important that would be. That's sensational. That first 100, maybe even that first 1,000, if that first team of 5 people can get out there and get them, you'll have cemented your knowledge about the customers in a much more better manner than any MBA can teach you, any MNC job can teach you, or what you learn for the next 5 years in your business.
Got it. So just moving on to another question from Pintu Singh. He has a question, and I think I'll relate it back with a question that Amit Varshne has asked. What's the most difficult things to scale when it comes to growing organization? And again, from your experience, and maybe the answer is, I think every business will have a different element to sort of figure out in scaling. But what's the most important thing that an early stage founder should focus on when the business is moving and growing rapidly?
Is your team ready to scale? Is your team ready to scale? I mean, I can list out many others, like obviously if you don't have money in the bank, if you're not funded enough to handle scale, yeah, sure. There's no. Second would be, is the market out there? You're looking at scale, but is the market ready to receive you and do scale? But those to me are housekeeping. The first primary and most important one, if you want to succeed, is your team ready for it? Do you have the right team, and is your team ready for it? Both. So
let me just add another part to that, which is getting team on board in early stage is tough. I mean, Arun Rath also had this question that, look, there's this urgency of scaling up, but I need funds to hire the team members. And Amit Vashne was asking this question that, look, I have challenges hiring and retaining.
Yeah.
When you're low on monetary currency, what does a founder have at that point in time to retain the best talent?
Yeah, I mean, it's everybody's problem. And I can tell you, what worked for me in my early days, and I think they're quite relevant today, is people want to, at that early stage, if they're not coming for big salaries or even a decent salary, they're coming to work for or with someone where they feel they can learn, they can feel inspired, and they can learn. Or they're buying into that person's vision and think this guy is going to change the world or do something here and there. So there's got to be that sparkle that they feel, this sounds like, number one, for the next 1 year, it'll be so disruptive, or I learned so much, or this person I learned so much, and I'm still young. So I'll take this thing because to me, this is much more going to be valuable than anything else. But I, as an individual, are going to grow. And that currency can be quite a valuable currency. And I can just give you an example. I took that nothing for granted. When we were starting off in media and entertainment, there were no people, there was no sector, there was no industry. So who were you hiring? You were hiring people who thought they could create something out of nothing. Now, what does that mean? It actually means they're not therefore trained in any business. There was not even training courses in that. And I think the bigger challenge there was not just to find the candidates, but actually convince their families whether these people could do jobs. So I think if you think it's a tough one, yes, it is a tough one, but your segregation will be those people, that 10, 15 member team you get, where the currency for them is a little bit of money, but a lot more in terms of inspiration, clarity, and feeling part of a thing where they feel this sounds like a phenomenal movement and I'm going to be a change agent. If you've got those kind of team members, I think there'll be long-term team members and they'll set the culture for you in the organization.
I think early stage is very important to sell your vision, because at that point in time, absolutely you're low on monetary resources, and that's the best resource that you have in your hand is your vision and what you believe in. And if you cannot rally people around it, I don't think so you can ever go out and raise funds on a vision in which you cannot get.
And I would go even further to say that it'll be a really bad, unfortunate situation where you've actually got the funding enough for you to now feel I can go out and hire whoever I want to do. And actually at that stage, it sounds like you're in a much better position than the guy next door who's actually not got the currency to start. But I can tell you 2 years later, he's going to be, or she's going to be 5 steps ahead of you.
Yeah, no, makes sense. I think, Ronnie, we have many more questions coming on funding aspect. So before I move on to those questions on funding, is funding a lot more over-celebrated in the Indian context, or is this the best excuse that entrepreneurs find?
I think it's a combination of both. So let's talk about the fact that I think for a lot of people, they feel comatose that if they haven't got the funding, they shouldn't be getting into business. It's almost a reason why I'm sitting on this fence. See, I'm ready to become an entrepreneur, but nobody's funding me. So then I can't go out and be an entrepreneur. And obviously that's not going to make sense, because very rarely does that actually happen. And I think today what you're hearing about, and therefore your perception is, go out and raise money. But for even those people in their early days, I don't think anyone's heard their backstory. And I think in some of the courses that we've got there and some of the case studies, you'll hear their backstories, whereas actually they started with nothing.
Snapple pivoted 7 times as they went about their business. No
funding in that context. So you got to bootstrap at that particular point of view. If your scale you were thinking of was 10x and you have to bring it down to 1x if that's what is needed. But start up. Because sitting there on the fence thinking I'm going to get funded until that time, not. So that I think is one aspect for that. And the second part I think is the first funding, the second funding that you get, the third funding you get, those are all liabilities. Those are not assets, because you are now inheriting investors. It's your responsibility that you're working for other people and you're much more accountable to them for their money. It's not a lark that you raise money for now for you to do that. It also brings about consensus in some form where you need to look after other people's interests than just going out and do your own thing. It brings a lot of discipline into the thought process, which is good, but a lot of accountability. So I think raising funds is not a celebration. It's just a good step. When somebody says congratulations, I'm saying the congratulations will be when we make a success of our business and we're highly profitable. At best you should tell me good luck and save the congratulations for when we're a really profitable company.
Yeah, because there's an interesting anecdote that I keep talking about, is that congratulating someone on funding is like congratulating an athlete for buying a new shoe without the race even starting at that point in time. Now, there's a question that's come from Manoj Ramnani. What are your thoughts from an early stage VC perspective and the current ecosystem that you see? There's a mushrooming growth in angel investors. Is that a sector which is getting overcrowded? Are there really quality angel investors that exist right now?
Well, as an entrepreneur, I don't think you should complain whether they're overcrowded or they're qualified, to tell you that very candidly. Because at that stage, they're coming in there, and to a certain extent, actually, we need that bottom of the pyramid. That bottom of the pyramid, which is where very basic ideas do get funded and the risk is higher. I think we need them. And not all of them are going to be highly qualified. And actually, one of the courses that we're doing at UpGrad is really to focus on this entire ecosystem of angel investors. But so I think you have no complaints from that point of view. I think it broadened, and I think it's narrowing a bit more, because that's the one that is not evolved. So angel investors, most of the time, I think, barring a few, you should assume are people who are otherwise got a full-time job or a full-time business, but are just out there because they believe they want to back a few people, some doing out of passion. Some people think they'll have a 10x multiple, and therefore this is like a side income for them. So some people do it from an income point of view, some people do it from a large point of view, some people want to actually deal with entrepreneurs and stay in touch with the market and deal with young people and so on and so forth. So you'll find different kinds of investors. But I think that's a good place for it to broaden. I think it did broaden, but now it's narrowed up, because as soon as they're hearing the bad news that, because the biggest risk for an angel investor is, I'm not going to put in more money. So what is the biggest criteria in the angel investor after he's got excited about your business is, okay, so I'm putting the first 10 lakhs or 20 lakhs or 30 lakhs. But his biggest risk is, will you be able to ever raise money again after this? Because if you don't, your history. So then his 30 lakhs is a zero-sum game. So that's really the critical element that you'll have to prove as you go forward.
So in that, at an early stage, what should one look at in an investor? I think we have a detailed module on that, where folks coming from Matrix and Axel as faculty member talking about funding and the challenges in that. But as an entrepreneur, what would you?
I think firstly, you're not going to be able to be that picky. But I think it's a lot about chemistry, because at that stage, it's a very one-on-one relationship with those people. And obviously, if you think somebody is going to be, the reason for why he's investing in you, at least you need to be quite clear about. Because if he thinks this is like, he's not got a job, he's not got anything else, and now he's made these 3 angel investments because actually he wants to spend one third of his time into each of the 3 businesses, then I think you have a problem, because only one person and only one person's vision or a group of founders can do it. And an angel investor can't come here and start co-defining your vision with you and can't start doing that. So I think an over-involved angel investor is not a great idea. An angel investor who says, I'm going to be your mentor, watch out for that, because I think over a period of time, mentorship is something, he's invested in you because there's a gap. You're at a different age group. Maybe that person is at a different age group, and how are you going to be able to interact? Because I don't think chances that at 28, 29, and 30, you're going to find too many angel investors, because they sort of have to evolve whenever. So I think it's a little bit of all of that. And you really don't need to be picky at that stage. A lot will depend on the chemistry.
I think 2 points that you raised here, both are interesting for me to sort of chip in right now. One is on investments and funding. So I think as part of the program, guys, at the end of the program, we do encourage you to sort of prepare your minimal viable product and pitch in front of a jury of investors. So we do connect you to the right set of investors at the end of the program, where you can go and pitch directly. And I think second, mentorship is very important, and we do have a mentorship track for all of you guys who will be enrolling into the program. Is it misunderstood that mentorship is about finding answers? What is mentorship about?
I'm very clear what mentorship is about. A mentor is really someone who asks me more questions than I've ever thought of. Because at the end of the day, I'm quite clear, I need to have the answers. If somebody else has the answers, in a discussion mode, if somebody is having a point of view and you want to hear the other point of view, that's not the answer, because the final answer is to yours. No mentor is going to be understanding all 360 degrees of the challenge, the problem, your people, your funding, everything else to give you that final advice. So anyone comes and says, don't hire a marketing person, do this, do that, that's not mentorship. So for me, it's really someone who's can be a good listener and then ask all the questions that I should have asked myself and said, okay, if these 20 questions, somebody would have prompted me before, for which I would have had to think through, I would have made less mistakes. That to me is the mentor.
Now, you personally have mentored few students for the first cohort of Startup with UpGrad. What was your sort of understanding in terms of the clarity of thought process that
I think I was very careful enough that I don't believe there was a single categorical answer that I gave. And I think all I told them is, you got 2 questions, and maybe I'm going to give you 3 or 4 questions back to you. I might paint a scenario to give you a viewpoint. But other than that, it was much more about getting them to think, so have you tried this? What do you think about this? And why are you doing this? And whatever else.
Yeah.
I think that's how it should be.
So the question that Raz Sheikh has, and again, this goes back to technology, online versus offline. His question is, why is it difficult to find VCs and equity funding for a tourism-based business? Many VCs cater to technology-based consumer services startup. It again comes back to the same question that
this is a sector-specific one.
Yeah,
but I think Make My Trip and many others have gone through.
Yeah.
I would say that one of the first few sectors that got funded was in the travel sector.
Yeah.
The travel sector actually got funded much earlier than most people. Make My Trip was the first listed entity in the whole space coming out from India, and that too on an overseas exchange. So
And just on that point, actually, Airbnb recently announced that they are going to move away from just being a hospital or hotel room provider, or sort of room provider, to planning your entire tourism trip in that particular city. So, Ras, to your question, I think it's not about online services versus an offline tourism business. I think it all comes down to whether you're leveraging technology enough to scale up the business. And if you're leveraging technology, you can be in waste management, you can be in tourism business, or you can be doing e-commerce. And I think all of them are taking the services in a different format and different platform, leveraging technology to scale up the venture. I think that's where a lot of confusion comes in, that it's online versus offline, but I do believe it's technology versus
it is.
lack of technology being leveraged.
No, and this sector is not ignored in any sense.
Yeah. So, just from an early stage funding perspective, Ronnie, is there any specific alternate form of raising funds that exist? There are angels, there are VCs and early stage sort of seed fund guys. Are there any other format of angel funding or any other format of angel
funding? I think in the social sector now you have got a quota. The government has started announcing the context of under the scheme of Startup India. So there is some sense of grants that are coming in. I would not be that hopeful for most of you all. That would not be the case. I think if you're starting it in the social sector, provided you're running it for profit and a proper profit, you do have what I would call subsidized debt that is quite lenient and has a 10-year horizon on that thought process. But with a caution, it is debt. So you have an onus necessary to pay for it. But sometimes that's a very good discipline, because it's giving you a timetable. You know it's not money that you can carefully spend out, but it gives you at least an option to be able to do that. So I think those are the two outside windows. And I think when you're sort of bootstrapping, it's a combination of putting in all of whatever resources. I think, you have to be able to go out there and get a few people now, whether it's an angel investor, whether it's family or whatever else. And therefore, I think some of the people do figure out that maybe I need to work for 1 or 2 years, at least build up some kitty. But actually that kitty is only to give me seed money to start my job. And therefore, I've said in the beginning, it's not a bad combination.
But that is interesting, because you raised a point on bootstrapping. And I think some people believe that I'm here to run a business only if I get funded, and bootstrapping is not what I intend to do. How important is bootstrapping and going through the rigor of being disciplined about?
Firstly, I think bootstrapping is critical whether you get funding or not. And I think you'll be fooling yourself in that thought process if you're not, because that cost model is there. The most successful companies and the most valuable companies in the world, I think they're in a bootstrapping mode. I would say
probably is the best form of learning that you can get at early stage.
And I would say if I look at the Amazon model, I think it is a bootstrap model.
In fact, there's a very interesting story that he has built a desk built on his own hand. And if you go and across different Amazon offices, that culture of frugality, which people sometimes believe it to be negative, has been built at Amazon, with that they can work at thin margins and still scale up the
very
business.
Thin margins. And if you see their travel approval process, it's not like anyone can get on a plane and get out there. It's still hardcore, get the right fares, pre-plan your trips. Why have we not got the best discounted fare? What do you mean by last minute planning? So if you look at that, and if you look at just segments like what you do with your travel bills, your phone bills, that talks about the DNA of an organization.
Actually, DNA of organization, I wanted to just touch upon this, because culture becomes very important in early stage ventures. And I think we have a strong module on culture itself, where we talk about how to build culture. But I think it's a lot of time misunderstood. It is thought about as culture is about going out and having beers at the end of the office hour, or culture is about having a dog in the office. What's culture for an early stage company? And how important is it? And what do you mean by culture?
It's very important. It's very, very important. It's going to make the difference in many cases between success and failure. And the reason I say that is because, earlier on I did mention that when somebody says, why do businesses fail that often? And I'm saying it's all about timing, and it's about how long are you willing to give it before you can turn it, because at some stage it is going to be successful. I think the same way is if you have that right culture, you're going to have a lot of setbacks, a lot of speed bumps. But if that 10, 20, 30, 40 people in the company have that buy-in and they know it, the culture is yeah, we've been through this before, don't worry, we'll survive. So the culture is we'll survive. Then, table tennis tables or beer is no longer, those are nice things. So I'm not knocking any of those. Those are all ands, but they're not the main attraction in that context. They're not the culture of an organization. Culture of an organization is, firstly, when everyone is very clear that they're bought into a concept, but it's also about, now frugality is a culture. I'm saying that we will be, come what may, we will survive or we will prevail is a culture. We are in the solutions business, and that, we're in this business where nothing sits on our table. We don't mull, we take decisions. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. That's culture. We experiment, we innovate more than most people. That's culture.
Yeah.
And it's all of that.
I think for me, just an interesting conversation that I'm having with the founder when we were sort of interviewing them and getting the course out, which was, I think culture, if you ask someone whether you want to sit in a beanbag or in a formal chair, yes, of course, everyone would prefer beanbag. I think when shit hits the fan and when you have to make difficult decisions, it's where culture actually takes you to the right course.
Yeah.
It tells you that this is a difficult decision, but I'll be frugal in this case.
Absolutely.
And that's where culture comes and plays a very important role for any individual sort of life, because it's a time of difficult decision where culture stands out.
Yeah.
And not in case of, yes, would you like to go out for beer? Yes, of course I'd like to go out for beer. They know the pro.
Yeah, I have to tell you, I've never gone out for beer with any of my colleagues in 25 years. Partly is because I don't drink, and partly because I think I'm socially awkward. But the culture of what one would build in terms of loyalty with everyone buying in, that it's as much your company as it's mine, or whatever that context, that sees you through, where even if you don't have had one may say, I don't have a bonding, but the bonding can be in different manners. Bonding is not necessarily 2 hours over dinner or whatever else. The bonding can be just, everyone is in sync, that says,
it's an open office, that's bonding. Yeah. I mean, those are things that define culture. Now, there's a question that we have from Sunil Barsayan. When it comes to early stage funding, what are people looking at more? Is it about idea, or is it about founder or team, or is it about opportunity?
I think top of the list is still going to be the founder team, the founder or founders more than anything else. And their clear ability to survive and succeed. That's going to be important. And I think the second one is going to be, so what sector are you in, and is that sector growing at a particular trot in the first place? I think those will be the two top
things, yeah. Which, again, one question that comes just now from Piyush. We're going back out of funding to sort of other aspects as well. He says that he is thinking of a business. There are 5 different service lines in the business. And customer validation is in his favor, that look, people love what he's looking at offering, but he doesn't have funds. So he can either go for all the 5, or he can pick up one that he can start immediately on. But the one business that he wants to start off is a small market. So there's a lot of complication in his question, but 5 versus 1.
That's when your analytical skill will come into that whole thought process, because you've got these 3 problems that you put in front of you, which is, the focus versus. So the first part is, at the end of the day, survival. You can have all these reasons, but if you're not going to be in business 2 months from now because you don't have funding, that's a certainty, right? Then you came up with a context that even if I were to pick, therefore, so the question is, what do I need to do to survive for a longer period of time? And if that means I need to do 1 or 2 or 1 instead of the 5, that will become a logical answer. Of course, it'll mean giving up a lot, but it'll still be not giving up all. Then you came up with a passion point in the middle of all of this by saying that, yes, but out of the 5 that I pick, you're not picking it from a survival point of view. You're not picking up it from a higher point of view, success point of view. You're not, but you're picking it from what you think passionately you'd want to do. Now, that's a tricky one, because if it's not the most sensible thing to do for survival, for success, for raising funds, for attracting the right team, you may need to do that. Because let's face it, entrepreneurship is not about always following your dream and following your passion. Let's face it, 50% of the time you'll be doing a lot of shit that you don't want to do. Just everything in every aspect. So there's a lot in entrepreneurship. And the more you get more resilient when you realize that, oh God, why do I have to do this? But you have to do it because that's the 50% pain that's going to give you 50% of a lot more pleasure when it all comes together. So don't expect the idealistic situations in the beginning because they don't prevail.
Yeah, because you have to take the hard calls, you have to take the hard decisions at all point in time.
At the end of the day, survival is the most important one in this case.
Yeah, because and I think there's also this misconception that just by being bootstrapped, you cannot scale up. But there are many examples of ventures that have just scaled up without raising any external money.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And we were discussing about those certain companies in India itself who have always rejected VC money.
Yeah. But no, I think if you start a business to say, I'm gonna not raise money from it, but try and make it a business by myself, you're much more likely to succeed than if you're starting a business to go first raise money.
Because that's just the means and not the end in itself.
Okay, I think we take.
Perfect. Yeah, we have taken up the time, guys. Thank you very much for all the time that you have. So
thank you.
If there's any question on so just to sort of finish it off and sort of summarize everything, I think the discussion that we just had and sort of picking up on your question is what we intend to sort of recreate in the program. The 15-week program is meant to provide you with clarity of thoughts around starting up, around sort of scaling up, and around funding and legal. And I think when we're starting up, we always felt that, look, we'll get 5 best faculty members from the academy and ask them to sort of come and teach you and ask them to come and sort of share their lessons with you. But very soon we realized that we can bring in best of the class of industry. So there are industry folks coming from the best VC firms to do this particular program, and lawyers and individuals who have done digital marketing to come and teach you, and 30+, 40+ entrepreneurs who are coming and sharing their experiences, because we believe that entrepreneurship, beyond being a structured learning process, is all about exposure and experiences, all geared towards providing you with the clarity of thought for a venture. So thank you guys for having me. Thank you, Ronnie.
All the best. Whichever way you go, all the best. Thanks.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.